How environment affects ADHD. You've spent years trying to fix yourself. You have read books, downloaded the apps, tried the supplements, started the meditation streaks, watched the productivity videos, and built morning routines that lasted 4 days before collapsing. You have treated your ADHD like a personal flaw that you could discipline your way out of. And every time you fail, you take it as proof that something is wrong with you. But what if the problem was never you? What if every system you have built to fix yourself has been pointed in the wrong direction the entire time? Because you have been treating ADHD like a brain problem when it's actually an environmental problem. This is the part nobody tells you. Your ADHD does not exist in a vacuum inside of your skull. It exists in the world around you, in the rooms you sit in, the desks you work at, the phones in your pocket, the people you spend time with, the noise levels you tolerate, the lighting you ignore. Every single one of those inputs is either pulling you towards focus or shoving you away from it. And you have been ignoring all of them while trying to discipline a brain that was never actually a variable. Every single one of those inputs is either pulling you towards focus or shoving you away from it. And you have been ignoring all of them while trying to discipline a brain that was never the actual variable. The problem: you sit down to work, within 4 minutes you are somewhere else. Not physically, mentally. You open a tab to do one thing, now you have 11 tabs and you cannot remember why you opened any of them. The desk is cluttered. There is a notification you did not consciously see, but your brain registered it. The lighting is slightly off. Your chair is wrong, the temperature is wrong. None of these things are loud enough to consciously notice, but together they are screaming at your nervous system, and you cannot figure out why focus feels impossible. Then you blame yourself. You tell yourself you need more discipline, more willpower, better habits, a stricter schedule. You add another layer of self-criticism on top of an already exhausted brain, and you wonder why nothing is working. Here's what changes everything. ADHD is not a deficit of attention. It is a regulation problem, which means your brain is hyper-responsive to its inputs rather than under-responsive. A neurotypical brain has the kind of internal filter that softens the signal of the environment. Your brain does not have that filter. Every input hits you at full volume, all at once with no priority ranking. This is why advice that works for neurotypical people is actively harmful for you. They can sit in a messy office, ignore 3 notifications, and still write a coherent paragraph because their environment barely registers. You cannot, because your environment is not background noise to you. It is the foreground. It is the loudest thing in the room even when you don't realize it. Once you understand this, the problem flips. You stop trying to build a more disciplined brain and you start engineering a quieter environment. You stop fighting your nature and start designing around it. The work is no longer internal, it is architectural. You are not the person who needs fixing, the room is. Your environment is doing half of your thinking for you. It is a function of your brain, plus your room, plus your noise levels, plus your screen state, plus your physiological state. Most people only optimize the first variable. You have to optimize all 5. When you walk into a cluttered space, your brain does not see clutter. It sees 47 open loops. Each item on the floor, each pile of paper, each random object on your desk is a tiny unfinished task pinging your working memory. You think you are looking at a messy room. Your brain thinks it's looking at a list of things you have not done. And working memory is the exact resources you need for deep work. So you sit down to focus and your tank is already half empty before you start. This is why the most productive ADHD founders are always the ones with brutally minimal workspaces. Not because they are aesthetic minimalists, because they figured out that every visual input is a tax on cognition, and they cannot afford that tax. They are not minimalists by preference, they are minimalists by necessity. The shift is to stop thinking of your space as decoration and start thinking of it as infrastructure. Your desk is not where you work. Your desk is a part of how you work. Treat it like a tool, not a room. Notifications are not interruptions, they are identity wounds. When a neurotypical brain gets a notification, it processes it, dismisses it, and returns to task. When your brain gets a notification, the dopamine system lights up and you are gone. You do not just lose focus, you lose the entire context of what you were doing. The thread you were pulling on disappears, and rebuilding that mental state from scratch can take 20 minutes or more. Now multiply that by every notification you get in a day. Every Slack ping, every email preview, every text, every banner. You're not getting interrupted 10 times a day. You are getting cognitively reset 10 times a day, and each reset costs you the deepest work you are capable of producing. The brutal truth is that most ADHD founders are not failing because they cannot focus. They are failing because their environment is not letting them stay focused long enough to ever reach the state where their best work happens. Deep work for an ADHD brain is not a switch you flip. It is a slow descent, and every notification yanks you back to the surface before you ever reach depth. This is why you have to be aggressive about it. Not polite, not balanced, aggressive. Every notification off by default. Phone in another room, not on the desk face down, in another room. Slack closed during deep work hours, not minimized. Emails checked twice a day in batches, not whenever it occurs to you. The goal is not to manage interruptions, the goal is to make them impossible. When you do this, something strange happens within about a week. You stop feeling the urge to check. The dopamine loop starves and quiets down. You start being able to sit with a single thought for 30 minutes at a time. which is something you may not have experienced as an adult. That is what your brain is actually capable of. It has just never been allowed to try. The people around you are a part of your environment too. This is the one nobody wants to hear, but is the most important. The people you spend time with are an environmental variable. And for an ADHD brain, they are one of the loudest variables of all. You absorb the energy, the urgency, the anxiety, and the focus level of whoever is in your immediate orbit. If they are scattered, you will be scattered. If they are calm and locked in, you will find yourself locked in too. A neurotypical person can have a frustrating coffee with a chaotic friend and bounce back to deep work an hour later. You cannot. That conversation is going to ride shotgun in your head for the rest of the day, replaying, looping, draining the working memory you needed for the actual important task. You did not have a coffee. You took a cognitive passenger. This means the audit you have to do is not just about your desk, it is about your calendar and your phone contacts and your team. Who do you talk to before you do your most important work in the morning? What is the last thing you read before you sit down to think? Whose voice is in your head when you try to make a hard decision? These are environmental questions, and they matter just as much whether your monitor is at the right height. The hardest version of this is when the chaotic input is someone you love. A partner, a parent, a close friend who calls you every day in some form of low-grade crisis. You cannot just delete them from your life, but you can absolutely control when you are exposed to them, and you can stop letting their dysregulation decide whether your day works. Boundaries are not a personal trait. For an ADHD founder, they are an environmental control. Your body is a part of your environment you forgot to design. You have probably spent more time researching apps than you have spent thinking about how your body is set up to work. This is backwards. Your body is the environment you can never leave. Every other environment is optional. This one is the room you spend every minute of your life inside, and the inputs to it determine whether your brain has anything to work with. Sleep is the obvious one, and the one that gets ignored. ADHD brains are catastrophically sensitive to sleep loss. A neurotypical person who sleeps 6 hours feels foggy. You sleep 6 hours and your executive function collapses for the entire next day. This is not a personality trait or a discipline issue. It is neurology. You cannot out-discipline your way through bad sleep. No matter how much coffee you drink, and pretending you can is a form of self-harm dressed up as ambition. Food is the second one. Most ADHD founders are eating in a way that creates blood sugar swings that look identical to focus problems. You skip breakfast, slam coffee, crash at 11, eat a giant lunch of carbs, crash again at 2, and wonder why your afternoons are unproductive. That is not your ADHD, that is your blood sugar. Stable protein forward meals at regular intervals will do more for your focus than any productivity tool you have ever tried. Movement and light are the two most underrated inputs of all. Your nervous system needs physical regulation to settle, and it needs natural light to set its rhythms. If you are working in a dark room with no movement breaks for 9 hours, your brain is operating in a kind of caged animal state, and you are asking it to do its best work. It cannot. It is too dysregulated to even start. Get outside in the morning, move every 90 minutes, and watch what happens to your focus by week 2. Friction is the real reason you don't do the things you said you would. The most underrated environmental design principle for ADHD is the elimination of friction. Every step between you and the action you said you would take is a chance for your brain to abandon the mission. Neurotypical people can push through 5 steps to start a task. You cannot reliably push through 2. This is why all your good intentions die at the launch point. You said that you would write every morning, but the doc is buried in a folder and you have to open 3 tabs and your notes are in another app. And by the time you set up the environment to start writing, your brain has already burned the activation energy on logistics and there is nothing left for the actual writing. You did not fail to write, you failed to design a path to writing that your brain could survive. The fix is to engineer your environment so that the right action is the easiest possible action and the wrong action is annoyingly hard. Your writing doc should be open before you go to bed so it is the first thing you see when you sit down. Your phone should be in another room so checking it requires standing up. Your gym clothes should already be laid out the night before. Your most important task of the day should be queued up and visible so you do not have to decide what to do, you just have to do it. Friction works in both directions and most ADHD founders only engineer one side of the equation. They make their good habits slightly easier, but they leave the bad habits just as easy as before. The real shift is making the bad habits genuinely hard. Sign out of the apps that pull you under, use a phone lockbox, put the snacks in the cabinet you have to climb to reach. Make the path of least resistance the path you actually want to be on. When you get this right, you stop relying on motivation entirely. The environment carries you. You are not deciding to do the right thing every morning. You are walking down a path that was already shaped to lead you there. Sound is the variable you have never audited. For an ADHD brain, sound is one of the loudest environmental variables, and almost nobody thinks about it consciously. Open offices, co-working spaces, kitchens with the TVs on, partners on calls in the next room. All of these are quietly destroying your ability to think, and you have been blaming yourself for not being able to focus in conditions that would scramble anyone with your writing. The reason this matters is that your brain cannot easily filter speech. Background music with no lyrics, your brain can ignore. Background conversations your brain cannot. Every sentence anyone speaks within earshot is partially processed by your auditory system, which means your working memory is constantly being asked to track conversations you're not even a part of. You're not being distracted on purpose. Your brain is just doing what it's wired to do, and the room is asking it to do too much. The single highest leverage move most ADHD founders can make is to invest in a real noise-canceling headphones and use them religiously during deep work. Not earbuds, real over-ear noise cancellation. Pair them with brown noise, instrumental music, or specific focus tracks, and you will create a sonic environment that your brain can actually settle into. The change is immediate and obvious within a single work session. My headphone suggestions are the Sony WH-1000XM6 for the best overall, or the Sony WH-1000XM4 for the best value. For the best budget, I recommend the Anker Soundcore Live Q20. For the most comfortable, I recommend the Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra. My personal pick is the AirPod Max. And my honorable mentions are any over-ear headphones you already own, plus some earplugs. You are the architect, not the patient. The deepest shift in all of this is identity. As long as you see yourself as someone with a broken brain who needs to white-knuckle through every day, you are stuck. The framing itself is the trap. You are the patient in a story where there is no doctor coming. And the only way to live is to keep diagnosing yourself with new flaws. The reframe is to stop being the patient and start being the architect. You're not someone who has to be fixed. You are someone who has to be designed for. Your brain is the user, and your job is to build the product around it. The room, the schedule, the people, the tools, the food, the light, the sound, all of it. It is product design, and you are the designer. This is why founders who thrive with ADHD are not the ones with the most willpower. They are the ones who got bored of fighting themselves and started engineering instead. They built environments that did the heavy lifting so their brain could be free to do what it's actually good at, which is generating ideas, making connections, and moving fast on the things that matter. They stopped trying to be normal and started trying to be optimized. Once you make this shift, you stop measuring yourself by how disciplined you were today. You start measuring yourself by how well your environment performed today. If you had a bad day, you do not ask what is wrong with you. You ask what was wrong with the setup, and you fix the setup, and tomorrow it runs better. The shame loop dies because there is nothing to shame. There is only design, iteration, and improvement. You have been told your whole life that ADHD is something you have, like a disease or a personality trait, something eternal that follows you around. That framing has cost you years. ADHD is not something you have. It is a way your brain interacts with its environment. An environment is half the equation you have been ignoring while you tried harder and harder to brute force the other half. Every system that has ever worked for you was secretly an environmental fix that you misattributed to discipline. The week you wrote every day was not because you were finally serious. It was because your phone was in another room. The month you trained consistently was not willpower. It was because your gym bag was packed by the door. And the quarter you shipped more work than you had in years was not because of focus. It was because you had quietly removed every input that pulled you under. You were not being a better version of yourself. You were operating in a better design environment. And you did not realize that was the only difference. So next time you sit down to work and feel the familiar pull of distraction, such as the static, the inability to start, the urge to check something, the fog, do not interrogate yourself. Interrogate the room. Look at what's on your desk, on your screen, in your ears, in your body, in your calendar. Find the variable that is screaming at your nervous system and turn it down. Then sit back down and try again. You will be shocked at how much your supposed brokenness was just bad architecture. You're not a person who needs more discipline. You're a person who needs a better designed life. And the moment you accept that, the entire game changes. If you're a founder with ADHD and want to be a part of a community with other individuals who understand how you feel on a day-to-day basis, join the school community below. See you inside.